On this episode of the WAC Attack podcast, we're talking about our favorite tools and accessories for cooking in the kitchen and cooking outside that help us save time on our meal prep, as well as help us cook delicious food with minimal amounts of time so we can maintain and achieve our healthy and active lifestyles. Enjoy the episode. All right, let's get it started.
Let's talk food, dude.
All right. Okay. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the WAC Attack podcast. Last time we were here, Curtis was talking to us with producer Scott. He decided to hop on the screen about, practical advice to sustainable and lifelong health and fitness. And, wrapping up that episode, they didn't really get into like diet or meal prep or how important, the sustainability of basically maintaining your nutrition is, right? And so that's what we thought we'd have a great episode on today. Specifically, we're going to talk about 3 segments. That's cooking tools and time-saving tips. We're also going to talk about sourcing of foods and making sure that those are going to have some decent form of quality. And then we're also going to talk about the third side, which is some time-saving bulk meal prep tips and tricks and things.
Alan is the king at that. I'm excited.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear.
Shout out to my wife for making me get there. But a lot of people don't know this about me. I did 4 years of culinary in high school, and I was seriously looking to go into like Le Cordon Bleu and Johnson & Wales, which are culinary colleges. Like these are things that I seriously considered, because in high school I really liked to eat. And
you also had an affinity for good quality. I don't want to call it high dining, but like, you were not going just to McDonald's and picking up a Big Mac. You were sourcing out good quality restaurants and making it a kind of an excursion, right?
Absolutely. At the time I had worked in a restaurant and served tables. I had also ran the student catering service at the high school we went to, and we had catered large events for like districts and school boards and, companies that were either affiliated with like the Booster at that time.
Yeah.
And
I'm surprised you didn't go and test out any of ARC's, because Guy Fieri
came from ARC.
Fieri, sorry, my bad. Came from ARC, and pumped a lot of money into their culinary program. But again, you've always had a good affinity for the experience associated with the meal. You're not just like, putting randomness on a plate and here you go. It's like that presentation. There's that opulent scale that goes into it that creates that experience that makes the food taste better.
Absolutely. And for me, I had always really loved to eat. And so loving to eat meant you had to love how to cook. And so I fell in love with cooking because of that. And also, what I found was like, wait, you can go to restaurants and you can buy really good food. And then like I sort of developed this thing to like go out to nice restaurants and, have a good meal. And, that's something that's always been really near and dear to my heart. And so naturally being able to come and talk about
how can I replicate this at home? How can I take this experience in food and put it on our own plate every day?
Right. And for me, it's been the last, 14, 15 years of doing this. And, the biggest thing that I found is time, right? Time is always the issue. If I have a Sunday available and Katie's watching the daughter and I got 3 or 4 hours to cook, I can cook something really magnificent and great. But the reality is most times we don't have a ton of time, right? And so, you have to think about how can you be able to get that experience, that really quality meal, and also not have to sink a bunch of time because you might not have it, you might be tired, etc.
And I don't think people are actually looking at the raw cost from a time and monetary perspective of what their meal consists of. There's the shopping, like deciding that you want to cook a meal, find a recipe, maybe you already have it, right? There's this this workflow you have to go through. And each one of those little processes has time. So let's take a look at sourcing the food, right? Or where are we at? Cooking tools. Oh, time-saving tips. All right, we're
you let way down. I'm
like, let's go. Let's go down further. My bad. I digress.
The tools have been a very helpful part of saving time.
Yeah,
and for me, I've looked at it as, like you said, you put a bunch of time into cooking. Like,
correct, yeah.
Like there's no way to get around that, whether that's grocery shopping or prep
Cleaning
or clean up.
Yeah.
You know, these things are very time consuming. And so, actually, those were the 3 areas that I looked at when I was considering, okay, what appliances, tools, accessories do you need, in the kitchen to really be able to minimize the amount of time it takes to do your prep work, your cooking, and your cleanup. And so after the last, 13, 14 years of doing a ton of cooking myself and at home with my wife, what I have found is that there are some pretty staple tools that you need in the kitchen if you are going to make a consistent and healthy relationship with cooking your own quality food at home.
Yeah.
First and foremost for me is a 36-inch skillet. This one I got probably in the last couple of years. This is the most time-saving tool that I have. And so if I can talk about, maybe ranking these in order of time savings, the skillet is 36 inches wide.
Now, is it the size that is
It's the size.
Okay, so size does matter. It is really it's the primary driver. It's not saying like, yeah,
absolutely. The size is a big deal because a lot of people have the stovetops that you have that cast iron skillet on. And it's just like a little small skillet that maybe you can cook some bacon or eggs with. And I've cooked on those before. Mm-hmm. But the skillet I'm talking about is a 36-inch skillet, and it goes outside, right? And it's got a grease trap and all of this stuff. But what I've found is you really need at least 2 feet of skillet width to be able to cook in bulk. And now if you're cooking for a small family, or if you're cooking in bulk prep for yourself or for meal prep, the amount of space is what really saves you the time.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I was able to cook just this past weekend. I was able to cook about 35 chicken thighs at one time.
Pretty sizable.
And I was able to have them on 4 different burner zones. And I was able to cook them with different seasoning and different sauces. And so I had an ability to keep them separated from each other so the flavors didn't get mixed. And so when you're talking about, saving time, the ability for me to cook, 30 plus chicken thighs roughly equates to, for my wife and I, about a week's worth of meals.
Yeah.
And so now if you consider this, like cooking your base foods for meals, whether that's a chicken or a beef or a rice or vegetables or whatever can be universally used across the recipes that you're selecting. We're going to get into that later.
Yeah.
That saves you a significant amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can prep once, I can cook once, and I can clean once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus if you're on a stovetop,
yeah,
you just have a big skillet pan, and let's say you wanted 3 different flavors like I had, you were going to have to prep about 3 times, prep or clean 2 times because you got to clean the skillet and everything else. And then you got to cook 2 to 3 times more, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I always just thought about it like my tools, need to save me time because time is the number one resource that we're all up against cooking quality meals.
Yeah.
So that's why the 36-inch skillet is great for me. Blackstone has a really good one. You can buy, I think they're like $300 or $400 for a cheaper one. I have the culinary version. It's about $1,200. It's got drawers and shelves and everything, and it's super nice. It has a lid. I would highly encourage people, if they have space and they're invested in cooking a lot at home, and they're eating a decent amount of a diet that is consistent, where you can bulk prep and do 4 to 5 days worth of meals. That is a great tool.
Yeah. No. What do you do to combat and again, some people may not have these issues, and some people may not even like to, do bulk prepping because, there's the snackers who may not want the same thing every single day and they're looking for quick, tips and tricks. Do you create variation with different sauces, or what's your approach to, I don't want to call it food burnout. There's probably some term for it, but like,
I think food burnout, we can label it as that. It's a great question.
I'm just kind of curious on what are you doing to elevate your meals just to make them a little bit more unique, if anything?
Well, I definitely think sauce is important,
Okay.
right? You can source a bunch of really quality sauces. You want to, make sure that you're getting minimal ingredient sauces,
Or making your own,
or
just
making,
like
or
mayo.
making, or
Well, I mean,
making
so
your
easy.
own, right?
Yeah.
I also think that variety comes in different textures.
Oh, 100%.
And so, the grill, like the skillet is a grill, you know what I mean? But I also have a smoker, right? A smoker is a very different type of flavor. And also there's air fryers.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also, looking at Katz's Deli, for example, on what they're doing with their meat. They're roasting it, they're smoking it, they're steaming it. There's so many different variations to add additional characteristics to the food.
Correct.
Hold on. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So we just dabbled into sauces for a second. We should continue onto that for a second. And then I just want to get back to tools. We did the 36-inch skillet for me, tool number 1. Maybe that wasn't your priority list, but
maybe
I'm just
just
saying.
keep that in front of you, Wally, and then we could.
Yeah, my thing with the sauces was I'm a snacker. So for example, I'll have prepped lettuce. I'll have a handful of sauces that I've created, and then I'll have some canned chicken from Costco as a quick snack. For example, it takes almost no time. I can easily just jump into the fridge, but I also have all of the food prepped. So when I order the food, when it comes in, I am essentially going through the process of preparing it for storage. And that for me has been my biggest time saver, because then for me, I can be a little bit of a snacker without having to put all the thought into planning out the next, week of my life, where tomorrow I don't know what's going to happen.
In addition to the sauces is also spices, to build on what you were saying.
Yeah.
I have a whole cabinet dedicated to spices. And so if you're talking about saving time, I recommend that you get as many pre-made spices that you can in bulk. So whether that's carne asada or
Kinder's a good company.
Kinder's is a good manufacturer that has it, and they got like buttery steakhouse, and they have garlic butter, and they have salt, pepper, and garlic. But if you can get these large bulk seasonings
that are not just single ingredients, they're essentially combined.
Right. They're usually going to have 5, 6, 7 different seasonings in it, right? That's going to be the single best way to save time, period. There's no questions about it. And also add flavor. But the other thing that I have found is this kind of gets into, bulk prep strategies and time efficiency, is when you get the food from the grocery store, whether it's delivered to your house or whether you go and get it yourself, you're going to have to take those ingredients out and you're going to have to go put them into wherever they're stored, whether it's the pantry or whether it's the fridge, etc. And what I found is the things that go in the fridge or the freezer, it is better for me to season those at that time and then put them in the fridge pre-seasoned, pre-marinated. So now you start talking about flavors and textures.
Huge time-saving hack, because
right.
Yeah.
And so flavors are now solved, and I only put the food away once.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's just a small extra step because everything's already out. You don't have to go get it, take it out.
Correct. And especially, if chicken or certain sanitization side, you're handling it once.
Yeah, you're handling it once. You're not handling it twice. And so having big gallon bags is especially reusable gallon bags is really, really important. And so for like if you have chicken breast or chicken thighs, or say, for example, this is one of my favorite hacks, which is like flap steaks.
Okay. Yeah.
So flap steaks are really thin steaks. They've got a decent fat profile on them. They're beef. And you can marinate those up well, and you get a lot of meat for a low price per pound.
Nice.
And so you can get this big flap steak. I mean, it's literally measured in feet wide by feet tall. And you can get that thing rolled up and put in a bag, and now you get that whole thing seasoned.
And I'm going to jump in here, and because my process is also, instead of the reusables, I do WAC seal to get ready for the sous vide. But my thought process with yours is very similar, but then with that marination time, you can get lower quality cuts of meat and then play the time game, especially being prepared, and create a better, more tender cut of meat
bite
of meat, I guess.
I agree 100%. I wouldn't agree on it being a lower quality of meat. I would say it's lower in popularity.
Different cuts.
Right.
And if we're talking about financially, so he is right that if
fat content.
Yeah, if we were choosing a choice of meat that wasn't the most expensive, but in the way you prepare it, season it,
you
right,
can amp that up to 100.
It goes a long way.
It goes a long way. That's all I was
massively,
trying to say.
That's all.
Because let's go down a rabbit hole here.
I didn't mean to.
Even, a lower, like a USDA choice, choice and prime, the only difference is the fat and the marbling. They still come from commercial cattle, right? Commercially farmed cattle. So the animal's largely still treated the same. That meat still doesn't have it doesn't have any, hopefully, preservatives. And there's usually very minimal amounts of cross-contamination, if any, like microplastics or pesticides, et cetera. So even a lower choice of meat and then being able to marinate it, season it, et cetera, you're still going to get that really good flavor. And so those are some time-saving tips and tricks that like we do when we get the groceries at the house. But now if we sort of go back up into the cooking tools and time-saving tips, right, that's really where having an air fryer is very important. Having a traditional barbecue is important if you want those nice sear marks. And I use an accessory called grill grates.
Okay.
And grill grates, you can put these on the skillet too. And this is what I really like about the skillet, is you can actually turn the skillet into a traditional barbecue if you buy these grill grate accessories.
Interesting.
And what they are is it's a flat piece of metal, and it's got about 1.5 inch tall grates, and they're basically just like spaced, an inch out, and they got a bunch of lines on them. So now if I want that nice seared look on a steak,
that's nice,
right? I don't have to have a large second cooking appliance outside with a barbecue. I actually just use a skillet, and I have this grill grate on, and I can close the lid. That's why I got the skillet with the lid.
Yeah. And then that's a culinary one, comes with a lid, probably the right. Okay.
And the grill grate has this really nice spatula. So it's basically like a forked spatula. The fork is about that big. The handle is about 1.5 foot long. And now it gets into all the little grooves, and then you can lift the steak up. So you can lift them all up perfectly, even if it's kind of stuck to it, and then just flip it over. And so what I like about that is, it's getting more of a full heat cook because it's on a very limited amount of hot surface.
That's nice.
Right? And then you get that nice aesthetically pleasing look because it puts the grill lines in it. So I can pick up the meat, I can flip it, so I can do a cross grill on it, so it's got the X's, or I can have all the lines going one side if it's a quick sear, like a high-fat steak. So for me, those are some of the tools that I have.
Another time saver, for sure.
That help you
and equipment saver.
With bulk, correct. And then they also help you with time.
Yeah.
And the air fryer is a beautiful thing too, because if you do happen to find like a quality vegetable that's organic, that's frozen, like Costco has some of those, or if there's other ingredients that are in your diet, the air fryer is a great way to get that nice, crispy, crunchy, fried sort of texture, but without all of the health issues with the additional oils. And so that has been one of my favorite. But I would say my ultimate in-house tool for time savings is definitely the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
That is single-handedly my personal favorite. And
that makes a lot of sense. For me, my biggest time saver is having a good quality knife. I feel like if I had to go out in the woods with one tool, I feel like I could survive in some capacity with a knife.
Here comes
I could agree with that.
Hey, here comes
100%.
a little random segment. Let's list top 3 kitchen tools. Alan, you start. You just said pressure cooker is your number 1, or am I speaking out of turn?
No, skillet
is number 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so you literally just said pressure cooker was your number 1
for indoor.
For
I'm curious.
Indoor, outdoor tools. Okay,
no, that's
I
money,
forgot.
yeah.
Okay, so okay, well now I new rules. Let's do indoor top 3.
Oh, for sure. Pressure cooker, cast iron skillet.
Okay.
So a 16-inch cast iron skillet for the stove with a high sidewall, probably like 2 inches. And then my third favorite is probably going to be a food processor.
Okay. Now I'm going to switch over to Wally. Top 3 is knife your number 1?
No. Number 1 would probably be zero water. I feel like water impacts quite a bit of things we cook. So I like having really pure, solid first base level, right?
I like that.
And then second would be a knife. I feel like if you don't have a knife, you really can't do much in a kitchen. And I definitely think a good frying pan, something like a hex clad, like not a skillet, but like a frying pan.
Hold on, we have to go backwards. You totally skipped over. You don't just have any knife, right? People can cook with knives. You have what kind of knives? Let's talk about this.
They're Shun knives from like Kershaw, the same company that we like.
Okay,
Zero
I'm just saying
tolerance.
that there's plenty of people that are cooking good food that have decent knives. Your knives, which I've used. Be careful, folks, but also you're not joking around with those.
Yeah, buy once, cry once. But a good quality knife is and a good quality frying pan, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like good water, good knife,
good
frying pan. I feel like, dude, you're set.
Yeah.
The water
is my top 3.
Is a very underrated ingredient.
Hey guys, let me say this. I'm sorry for hijacking, but I like the difference there. It's like the two of you could combine. You know, it's like he's got all the machinery and whatnot, and then Wally's got the basics down. Anyways, so back to where we were on the list.
Well, I could also agree with you on the knife. I think I've been really spoiled in that my knife set at home. Every time you put the knife in and out of the housing,
It sharpens.
it's got a sharpener. So every slot
deburrs,
It's called a knife block.
has a deburring and a sharpener on it.
That's nice.
And so when I pull it out, I just go in 6 or 7 times.
Bless you.
Yeah.
And the knife, like especially cutting like yams or sweet potatoes, is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's very consistent. But a lot of people, I don't think, take good care of their knives, and that makes a world of difference when you're prepping food. And you don't think about it saving time, but like a great example is a tomato.
Yeah.
If you're cutting up a tomato, how many times are you sort of breaking the skin versus slicing the skin nicely? A very nice knife is going to allow you to cut through that like butter.
Yeah. Or cut through bone.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're prepping meat, for sure.
Absolutely. But also it won't mark your knife, and you don't have to,
Yeah, blade maintenance. And I just know for Cutco, you can always send them back to get resharpened, right? They have like a lifetime membership. But anyways, a nice knife.
Nice knife. Yeah. It does go
definitely
a long way.
the vibe.
100%.
Yeah.
And so for me, like those are my cooking tools. You sort of named off yours.
Yeah.
Right. But I sort of have just been in the mindset of time efficiency.
See, and that's where I'm less on the time of it. Well, I am definitely conscious of the time efficiency, but I also am like really only like 6 years ago I had a kitchen that I could really control, right?
Right.
To a certain degree. So it's kind of all relatively new. Versus yourself and with your brothers, you guys are your mom needs help cooking. You're in there, like you're rocking it. You know what I mean? Like where my mom's like out of the kitchen, like I'm working with chicken right now. This needs to be like setting up for surgery in our kitchen. Like you had there's mayo on this. This could be disease worthy. Like let's get very to a degree where it was. Well, I'm just not even gonna
almost
go in
like
there.
hypochondriac.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna stay away. I'll focus on other things. I'm gonna go play with some computers instead.
Yeah.
I don't need to get into this cooking stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, I definitely hear you on
and
that.
also with DoorDash was another big one.
Hey, a segue real quick. Where did you get your knives? Was that a wedding gift? Or I'm saying your knives, or no? That wasn't did not have to do with a gift. You just simply bought nice knives.
Oh yeah. Alex, essentially every Christmas or birthday, I'll get a new one because I very specialized of like what specific knives I want.
Oh, it wasn't a whole set.
Yeah,
it's been okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, not a whole set. Because
Well, these knives are
I like
expensive.
They
a
are
lot of
they are dude.
the Japanese style, like versus a chef knife to go to there's a certain name for it, but there's differences that I wouldn't just want a baseline set that gives you.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, do me a favor. Bring this thing. Bring the mic
Sorry.
parallel to your face. It's like all kind of crooked. And, yeah, there you go. There you go.
All right, Alan. But what about outside tools? Can I hear about those, or do you not want to tell me? Is it a secret?
Well, I mean, we already covered off on the outside tools.
Your top 3?
The skillet is my favorite by far.
36 inch
and then
skillet.
have the 36-inch skillet, and then put the grill grates on it. Those are my top 2 favorite
It's just so
tools for outside. But the
it's so
smoker,
it's so multi-purposeful though.
Right.
And that's where, and also, think about this. Space is a huge commodity for some people. And again, not
especially if they live in a townhouse or apartment.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Like, these other types of, I mean, I'm not trying to say this out loud, but I watched a small documentary on George Foreman not that long ago that broke down his play with that George Foreman grill. But like, what are some tips for people if they're looking to kind of get that grill without the outside space?
Yeah, and if you look at the skillet, one of the nice things about the skillet is the flames are very minimal, right? And they're under this 36-inch cast iron skillet. And so if you are in a place that's got an overhang or like a pergola or something like that, you can actually cook underneath
that's cool.
With the skillet, because the skillet is not going to be generating significantly high amounts of heat like the barbecue is. And it produces smoke.
Oh, it does? Okay.
But the main thing is, like, when you have a traditional barbecue, let's say you're cooking like tri-tip on it, well, that fat is dripping down into the barbecue where the flames are. And then those flames can be getting hotter and cooking that oil and everything else. And that's why you can open up the barbecue and you can have a little bit of a grease fire. The nice thing about the skillet is that there's a grease trap.
Yeah.
And so all the grease is draining into that grease trap. And so you have much more of a controlled and prescribed cook, and whereas the barbecue is a little bit more of the Wild West. Let's talk about some other of the outdoor tools I like. Now, these are not in the name of time savings. Okay. When I have time to cook, these are my favorite items to cook with. One, the charcoal Weber barbecue.
Okay.
There is, in my opinion, no flavor better than a nicely cooked charcoal steak, right? Not a charcoal steak, but a steak cooked with charcoal.
Yeah.
And so there's different ways that you can cook with a Weber barbecue. And, if some people who don't cook with charcoal barbecues might not know this, but you definitely need a spot where there's not going to be stuff overhead that you can catch on fire, right? Or an eave that's going to, maybe spontaneously combust if you're right underneath it. But what I really like about the charcoal barbecue is it's got that smoke flavor, but it's also got a direct or an indirect heat. So if you're cooking something like a tri-tip or a piece of meat that's larger, you can put all the coals on one half, and then you can put the meat on the other half. And then now you're getting the whole thing up to temperature because it's in that 400 to 500 degree range or 350 to 400 degree range. But it's not directly on top of. Now, what I also like about the charcoal grill is the exact opposite. You can get that coal so hot, or the charcoal, not the coal.
The briquettes, yeah.
You can get the
charcoal briquettes, yeah.
Yeah, the briquettes so hot in the chimney when you start them, like get them all glowing red hot. And then dump them all on one side or right in the center, and then quickly cover that and open the vents so that's getting full vents and the fire's breathing full. And then you can go get a nice fatty steak like a New York or a prime rib. And you can put that thing on there for 3 or 4 minutes aside and sear it. And it's getting seared and it's so hot that it, to me, is like this perfect medium rare steak.
Yeah,
because
you
can't
I was
get
gonna
that.
ask you, what are you doing with like temperatures and stuff? Because when I was thinking out of like my cool gadgets for outside or cool tools that I need, for me it's precision, right? So like I need to know my telemetry from like the barbecue or.
Well, that's why you like the sous vide so much.
Correct, but with your with your skillet, you have 4 heat area
correct
locations. Does it just digitally display the temperature, or is it a 1 through 10 scale?
It's analog.
Okay,
it's analog, right? So it's the same thing, but that's why the charcoal barbecue is so hard to master because you only have one unit of measurement.
It's an art,
and that
is touching the steak with your finger and getting that medium perfect.
You have a thermometer gauge on top of the cover of the charcoal barbecue.
Okay,
yeah, the Weber barbecue. And so you put that on, and basically you have to know to leave it on for so long to get it to the actual temperature. But you also have to know when you pull that lid off, how much temperature do you lose every time? And Well, it's the temperature difference for how long you keep the lid off.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's why I said you have to have a lot of time when you cook on the charcoal barbecue, because you have to start the charcoal correctly. You have to get the charcoal down correctly. You have to then get the lid on and let it heat up. And then you have to use a certain amount of charcoal for however much cook time you have. And so for me, I love the charcoal barbecue.
So I was thinking about it myself.
For either a really slow cook.
Yeah. Or a vacation cook.
Or a very fast, very hot cook.
That makes sense.
And there is nothing quite like it. I can't explain what it is. It's just that the texture of the meat is like kind of nice and crispy on the outside and not burnt, but the inside is sort of that melt in your mouth type of texture and flavor. So you get this broad spectrum. It's not mushy. It's not hard. It's not crunchy. It's like a little bit of a combination of all three.
Interesting.
Right. And so for me, that's what I enjoy when I have a lot of time. And as you can understand, there's a lot of variables there versus just go turn it to a 6, hit the start button, come back out 10 minutes later. The skillet's perfectly hot across all of the burners, and now your cooking is nice and even.
Yeah, literally, I kind of recalling the times that I've cooked utilizing charcoal, and it's literally only on Airbnb vacations. So like for me, like that was, I'm replaying the steps, but you're right. And that's like when you're on vacation, you have nothing but time to waste. You're reading a book or something, like it becomes that enjoyable process. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's when you have time. So, but my nature has always been like time savings.
Yeah.
Right. Because like I said, I let off with, I don't like to cook. I like to eat. And therefore I have to be good at cooking.
Let's talk about the sourcing the quality foods then.
Hey, before we get there, this big bad boss showed up in the backyard, and it's a Traeger.
It's a smoker.
It's a smoker. So Wally wanted to know about, is there digital heat? Is there this and there that? Oh, Wally, this is as scientific as you can get it, right?
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with the, what is it, Firewire technology.
The smoker is off the hook. I think everything that you would geek out about, cooking and tech, because
I have literally looked at their APIs.
Yeah, you have a really good segment that we'll talk about in the sourcing of quality foods with how you've integrated some technology. I don't want to spoil that. But the Traeger, or any smoker really for that matter, I'd say the most important piece of technology, and that is the meat thermometer.
Yeah.
Right. And now the Traeger is not time efficient, because usually you're doing a cook over a long period of time. Like for example, this weekend I just cooked ribs, 6 hours, right? 7 hours total cook time from prep to finish.
Okay.
But 6 hour cook time. Okay. So you got to think.
And where'd you source those ribs from, out of curiosity?
So I source those ribs. There's a place, we'll get into that, but it's a local butcher.
Oh, cool.
So we'll talk about that here in a bit. And I'll get into that, but it's Roseville Meat Company. And so, for me, the thing with the smoker is it takes practice. You have to have a constant commitment to it for a long period of time. You're constantly having to check in on it, make sure it's not dry, add some sauce into it, basically maintain moisture levels is like the essence of smoking. And then there's all the variables about like what type of wood do you use, what flavor does that put off, and then not to mention the cooking and the cleanup, because what basically happens is in the bottom of the smoker, there's this little, basically think like oven that cooks the wood pellets. And so there's a torch down there that's just cooking the pellets, and so they're smoking. And so what basically happens is this thing can fill up with ash. So you basically, after a cook or two, have to disassemble your entire smoker, go in there with a vacuum it all out, right? Clean everything all up, and then you can go and smoke again. So that's why I started with my favorite tool is the thing that saves me the most amount of time.
Yeah.
It produces the best flavor consistently the most often, right? But there are very unique flavors that come from that charcoal Weber barbecue and that come from the smoker. Now you might say, great, Alan, I'm not a barbecue guy, right? Well, the skillet, you can cook eggs, you can cook bacon, you can cook steaks, you can cook vegetables, right? You can cook a multitude of
pancakes.
Different things on it. You could do pancakes on it. I've done it before.
I know.
They're amazing too. It's like this, best crispiness that you've ever had. But you had asked them there, like, hey, where did I source the meat? Like, sourcing of quality foods. This is a really good conversation because I believe there is this intersection of cash or cost and what is quality food and what is your opportunity to source those ingredients.
Yeah, and I also want to throw this out there. We live in Northern California, where we are extremely privileged.
Farm to fork capital.
Correct. I mean, most of our states, well, not most, but a large portion of our GDP, I mean,
is ag.
Yeah.
And
Just
we're
wanna
very
conscious
fortunate
of that.
to have a significant number of, farmers markets and everything else. And so I have to look at quality is not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to be dependent upon your geography, and it's going to be dependent upon, what is the investment that you want to be making into your food, right? And then also how much time do you want to be spending? So if you're saying, hey, I don't really have much of a means to go beyond my local grocery store, okay, I would say, okay, that's great. If your local grocery store has, meat that's there and you're looking to buy meat, okay, try to buy it from reputable farmers. Most of the meat in grocery stores comes from very large commercial farming. And so I'll start with beef, and then we'll go into some poultry, and then we'll go into single ingredient foods. And so beef, if you can find grass-fed, grass-finished, that's obviously going to be your best. Although, I'll say this, it doesn't taste the best. It is the most nutrient dense, but some of the best tasting meat is largely coming from very fatty, cattle. It's not a healthy cattle, but it does produce a very good flavor. And now, so there's some people who are like steak connoisseurs, and depending on what you feed the cattle, whether it's a grain diet versus
amazing
a grass diet,
how we have evolved to literally make our food eat. Like, we
Right.
choose what our food eats,
right?
to a degree. Like, that is just insanity.
Make this animal more unhealthy because it tastes better when I eat it. And so
so cool.
if you're stuck in a place where all you can go is to your grocery store,
Yeah.
I would be looking at when was it packaged, right? When was it processed? Look at the dates. Try to find something that's super recent. And that's on all meats. If you can, for poultry, find something that's pasture raised. That's going to make a big difference. The availability of nutrients and the nutrient density is going to be a very large, especially in eggs. You're going to get a nice golden orange egg yolk versus like a very thin, yellow looking yolk from like a egg and a chicken in a cage on a commercial a poultry farm, right? And so those are some things that you can look at from a meat perspective. From your other ingredients, if you can buy organic when you have the availability to, you should. And the reason why is pesticides and contaminants in your food. Organic foods have more restrictions on what can and cannot be put on them and how often they can be sprayed. Okay, and so you're going to be better off minimizing any pesticides or cross-contamination from any of your produce by buying it organic. If you're buying something that is a packaged food, I highly recommend going with a single ingredient food. Most packaged foods are not single ingredient foods.
Can you give us an example of yeah.
Absolutely. So a box of Cheez-Its, okay? While I love them and they taste amazingly good, and I don't eat them unless I'm absolutely dying to have a Cheez-It. But my point is there's plenty of preservatives in that. If you look at the ingredient list, it's going to be very small. And I'm sorry, it's going to be very large in terms of the number of ingredients. The text is going to be very small. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And then when you look at a single ingredient food or a whole food that's packaged up in a box, like a really great example for a snack is a company called That's It. And they make these fruit bars. And literally the only thing that's in them is like two fruits. So like apple and strawberries, or mangoes and bananas or whatever. And so it's like, that's it.
And I think you can also get away with that because there's active ingredients like molecularly in those, in a strawberry that will allow them to, you don't need caking agents and all these different types of things to, hold your mold and emulsify the ingredient because this one ingredient has all of these different chemicals in it, obviously, right? You think about it in that.
I'm not a scientist, and I don't think about it as like this naturally has these compounds.
But like,
occurring.
how could you do something like it's harder to do that like at scale, like it with like an RX bar, for example. They utilize the egg as a typical binder.
Right.
Fruits, you can do that because they have that.
Correct. And so go with single ingredient foods as a goal, and then realize that there's not many snacks or pre-packaged products that are there. And so if you can keep the ingredient list about under 5 as a general good rule of thumb, you're usually getting a pretty good quality product. A great example of this is popcorn. Okay. So popcorn will usually have a seed oil like a canola oil or a palm oil. It'll have some preservatives. It'll have salt. It'll have some corn in there. It'll have an ingredients list long of like some anti-caking preservatives, and also not preservatives, anti-caking ingredients, and then also some preservatives. Versus there are some popcorn bags out there that they'll literally have ghee or coconut oil that they cook it in. They'll have the corn itself because that's popcorn, right? And then they'll have whatever the flavoring is, like a salt, a Himalayan salt, or a cheese, right? And it's less than 5 ingredients. And so when
I have this weird example of never mind. Yeah. I'll let you continue on. My bad.
And so if you live in a place that, you just have to go to your local grocery store and that's where you get your food from, these things are going to make you realize that the foods that you should be eating from your grocery store is maybe less than 10% of the foods that are actually there.
Correct. Yeah.
And you'll realize that everything else is filled with either preservatives or fillers, or it's going to have an ability to have a significant amount of cross-contamination. And the 2 forms of cross-contamination that I'm really talking about is microplastics, anything that's heavily processed, like Cheez-Its. They found microplastics in Cheez-Its. And then, if you're thinking about it from a pesticide perspective, or let's just say like generally an assembly line, right? There's a bunch of equipment that's manufacturing food. Let's say your child has a peanut allergy. That's a whole different topic for a different day, right? That processed food, if it also is in a facility that processes tree nuts and other items, shellfish is another prime example for meats, what's the guarantee that there's not going to be some level of cross-contamination there? And so those are my rules for just sourcing and buying quality products. And if I have the ability to go to a nicer place like a butcher or to go to a farmer's market, those are great alternatives to find really high quality products. Specifically, if you're doing a lot of cooking and you're really committed to this, buying a cattle or a cow or a half a cow is a great way to,
or sheep or
whatever animal you eat.
Make that land.
It's a great way to source quality because then you can actually go out, meet where the animal lives, see the people, see how invested they are in the process of regenerative agriculture and everything else. And that's a way where you can source some quality products. But again, I think people's tracks are largely dictated by how much time do they have, what is the availability of food in their region, and how much money do they have, right? It's like anything else. You can put in as little or as much money as you want into sourcing those quality ingredients.
Yeah. I would imagine back before the internet, people actually went to the fair and really purchased their meat.
Yeah.
I mean, but before
buy that cow over there. That's a nice looking cow.
For the internet, man. And, there's a lot of, anyway, I digress. 4-H is a great organization. And,
This is where I come in. I moved around a lot and I went to Delaware High School and before that, Franklin Elementary and then Delaware High School. And I was just going to say 4-H was something that was very new. Being a new kid, there's obviously so many things to figure out. I figured out that I was living with a bunch of farmers. So, City Slicker sort of turned into me showing up when the butcher shows up and this good friends of mine having their livestock sort of sold off and cashed out and, all butchered up right there in the the front lawn, big puddle of blood and everything. And so it was really eye opening, but also I saw this kid get $6,000 for a pig that he raised.
My wife's sister, same thing.
So,
I ate her sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For shepherd's pie, I didn't know. And it was like it was an oddity, but it puts it in perspective to know where your food comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4-H, that's all I was going to say is that 4-H is a good.
And if you have an ability to do that, I think having a relationship with your food, especially if you eat an animal-based diet, I think it's very healthy. And they're finding out now that, the optimal human diet is one that's significantly high in protein. And, salt is actually a very big deal in the, healthy diet because of electrolytes and everything.
You're saying in a positive way.
In a positive way.
Yeah.
But what they're finding is, the preservatives, the pesticides, these things are largely wreaking havoc on the endocrine system, which regulates your hormones, amongst other items. And so, going with the route of like at least how I've been taught to select food ingredients, right? That's going to help minimize your potential risk of, bringing foods into your house that have an ability to disrupt your endocrine system. And specifically on that point, there's a dirty dozen list. Sorry for not enunciating that. Strawberries are at the top of that, right? Because the strawberry sits on the ground, and they spray pesticides on it all the time. Spinach is number 2, right? Because spinach is a nice leafy green. Insects eat it. And so a great way that you can also not only source these foods, but you can also prepare them correctly is by washing them and cleaning them thoroughly.
Correct. And also maybe even talk about, like, for example, you're making mention to vegetables and leafy greens, things like that, things that are typically, insects love that. But, maybe even taking a look at other alternatives like hydroponically grown vegetables that are in a closed system, right? So they're not necessarily in...
Or a greenhouse.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're out of the elements.
And this is one of the things that like gets me like sort of ambitious, or I shouldn't say ambitious, but optimistic about society. Some of the vertical indoor gardening that's happening, especially in urban centers, where they're not having to deal with this monocrop agriculture, pesticide problems.
It's amazing.
It's really great for sourcing quality ingredients.
5-gallon bucket and a 3D printer, like a 5-gallon bucket and some white spray paint. Got to have some PLA. And I made our 3 Ventures logo that I could be printed that you could put little strawberries in.
Yeah,
it's
so badass.
It's 3 feet by 3 feet, just really small. But, for our office, it's just a fun little thing. All circulating, just runs a little pump in there, has a raspberry. Well, it's an Arduino, actually. But, it's really fun, right? But that type of concept helps. You can go to a grocery store, buy a lemon, throw it in a bag, put it in a, cool, dark place, put some, cinnamon like our guy does on YouTube, and then grow this yourself.
Yeah.
Like
you can literally do that. But speaking of sourcing quality foods, you've automated a lot of this in your household. Can you talk about that?
I'm not necessarily. It's not necessarily sourcing quality foods because it's coming off of Amazon Prime and Whole Foods, but or like Costco via Instacart. But that's where I source my food from.
Right. I think most people probably source their food there who live in urban environments.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'll take certain things. Like if I find I'll order like cherry bomb tomatoes or like some special grape or some special unique highly crossbred, amazing, unique vegetables. I'll take their seeds and I'll just like regrow them because it's fun.
Because you can.
Because you can.
And I having a good relationship with quality food is it's very humbling because you realize that the foods you eat literally have seeds in them to reproduce, especially if they're vegetables.
Yeah.
Right. Or if you're eating an animal, having some form of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I think some government agency, I think it was Department of Energy, I believe, or one of those. This is many years ago. Like in the Iceland area, I don't remember if it's Antarctica or Iceland, one of those, right? They tried to keep it like a perfect like habitat for scientific research, and then they ended up finding like it was covered up, but like somebody had like tomatoes were growing out there. And it was covered up until it was declassified, but they literally classified that as something. But it's such an interesting thing that there's life cycle propagation. And I mean, like a tomato seed may only go for what, 20, 30, there's a certain life cycle of that plant, obviously.
Right.
But it's amazing how Mother Nature just keeps pumping them out.
Yeah. And, so when you talk about the sourcing of quality foods, those are the things that I look for. Curtis could probably come on and talk a lot more about, specific health benefits and seed oils and linoleic acids with grass-fed, grass-finished beef versus, a corn, wheat, soy-fed beef. That's not really my cup of tea, but those are the things that we talked about that I use to source, the quality ingredients in my household. And then also when you bring them home, we talked about earlier, especially meats or anything that you're going to cook in bulk. That you're going to do for like a meal prep or those types of items.
Or to preserve for later because no one wants to waste money on food and throw it away.
Right. It's really important to, marinate those or pre-season them or those types of items so that it's easier to cook. Now, I don't do anything on making food last longer because I at least think that over the years I've been really disciplined in like pre-planning and selecting the types of recipes that I like. Like every time I cook a new recipe that I like, that I think I could cook in bulk, I print that out and I add that to my a recipe folder that we have.
Oh, that's cool. So
right?
I use Jira for that.
Yeah, perfect.
But yeah, same thing. So you're keeping track of them. We used to use Pinterest, but then after one of our employees got his Pinterest account taken down, I was like, I'm not putting my eggs in that basket.
Yeah, exactly. And so now I have a physical copy so nobody can go back and change it. Right? Yeah. And, so when I go shopping, if I'm going to be doing like a bulk prep or a bulk meal prep, I know that, okay, I want to cook these 4 or 5 meals. I try to pick meals that are sharing the same base ingredients.
Okay.
And by same base ingredients, I could, potato, a certain type of meat, whether that's chicken or beef or poultry, doesn't matter, or a rice or a vegetable, whatever your diet is that you're doing. I try to pick ingredients that are commonly used. And then maybe like we talked about earlier, the texture or the seasoning is different, right? Or the cooking method slightly varies. And so for me, pre-prepping those when we bring them home from the grocery store and then getting them in the fridge and the freezer, that saves so much time. And I cannot express like how important that is to, put into your process.
Yeah.
The other thing too is I don't do much on the preservative fronts of making vegetables and fruits last longer.
Oh, see, that's one of the things that I will do if I get like green onions or something like that, or, I'll put them in a thing of water and make them last, I don't know, a couple weeks.
Really?
Easily. Yeah. And like dill or just certain ingredients I'll put in water. This is an easy way just to preserve their life cycle. And if you do water and in the fridge, it amps it up to the next level. But in my kitchen, I also have like a bunch of these like hanging planters where I literally have green onions that are growing right now. And I cut them every week, and then I just chop that up and I prep that.
So I can take a green onion and put it in water in the fridge, and it will keep it nice and fresh and crunchy.
Yeah, crunchy. Yep, 100%.
Because I always, it's always so disheartening.
You have to be conscious.
I go to make some eggs in the morning.
Yeah.
To make a nice breakfast, and I'm like, ooh, it'd be really nice to put a nice thing of chives on top. And I go and I pull it out, and it's just like this whittled, nasty green onion. So I just cut 2/3 of it off and take the things closest to the base. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But if you don't put it in the fridge, when I cut the ones that are on our wall, it will like leak.
What's the thing with cinnamon and lemon you mentioned earlier?
Oh, cinnamon just it inhibits bacterial growth.
Really?
Yeah. Like I also started on my like lemon trees and stuff. I did like the olive oil, water, and dish soap as a way of just keeping the bugs. They just slide right off. It's cut down on like the aphids on the roses and stuff. But again, I'm a huge citrus fan. I have tons of.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think a nice lemon zest on top of many things can go a long way.
Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier.
You have to have the acidity in there.
About
Balance
like,
it out.
Yeah, if somebody is wanting to do some meal prep and they're new to this, right, they're probably going to feel like anything else, like it's going to be overwhelming. They don't know what to do. They've never done it before. It's
overwhelming for even my own self. I haven't done like I've done it a couple times, but then it gets thrown away because like, oh well, now I'm gonna make this weird fettuccine dish, or I'm gonna go try this,
Yeah.
So if you have that, if you're not really regimented with it, it becomes a bit of, or you have variability. You don't know if you're going to be out with your friends or you're more sociable.
Or
right? But you're a family. You're cooking for a family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're a young man or woman and you're impulsive, definitely hard to, like you said, Wally, if you have 3 meals that are, stacked up waiting for you and you've already polished through whatever, the first 3, it's pretty easy to be like, hey, food burnout and I'm going to order something. You know what I mean? And being a snacker. It happens
to me so much, man. I throw so much food when I do the preps.
And this is why
so hard.
I have found for our household, our best approach to meal prep is not actually meal prep in a traditional sense. It is, I eat 2 meals a day prior to getting home, right? Actually, I eat 4 meals a day. 1 breakfast, first lunch, second lunch, and dinner, right? So I eat both lunches at work. And if I'm at work 5 days a week, that's 10 meals. Katie, my wife, if she eats, she usually eats 1 a week or 1 a day, 5 days a week. So we know we have to cook 15 meals at work. But what I have found is when I was cooking 15 meals a week, there were always that 2 or 3 that didn't get eaten. And it was always, oh man, I'm tired of that. We've had that, like you said, Scott, the burnout. And so for me, what I realized was, oh, okay, I need to cook like 7 to 10 meals in a meal prep. And then those remaining, 5 to 8 meals, what I do is when I do the meal prep, I cook the meat that we're going to have with that ingredient or whatever the main recipe or the main ingredient is in the other recipes we want to cook. That way, if you do want to have something different at night, but to save money and to eat in and to, know what's exactly in your food, you have most of the heavy lifting of the cook done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, like, one of my favorite meals to have is this bowl. It's got a little bit of rice, jasmine rice, because I like that specifically. I love the flap steak or the flank steak, depending on where you get it. They're different, but, sometimes they're used interchangeably. And a little bit of asparagus chopped up into pieces.
Money. Yeah.
I love that in a bowl.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, like, it's super easy to cook rice. You have a rice cooker, you can cook it in a pot in, 10 minutes. Also, the asparagus is really easy to sear and just give it a nice, crispy, crunchy flavor.
Or blanch it.
So or blanch it. So if I have that meat cooked and prepped, more than half of my cook time and my prep time is gone.
Yeah.
And so now when I do the meal prep, I try to think about this. If I'm already going to have the skillet dirty outside, needing to get cleaned off, etc.
Oh, yeah.
Why am I not just doing more cooking at that time?
100%. Yeah.
And so now it's
such a great time saver.
Right. And now it's less about meal prep in terms of prepping all these meals, and it's more about bulk ingredients that you can use throughout the week if you want to have these dinners or snacks. Like, it's so great to just, have a couple pieces of meat or whatever else, a high protein snack. That way you're not going to a bag of chips or whatever else.
Yeah.
So that's what I have found on like some of the bulk prep strategies, and also not wasting food, but being able to save some time. When Katie's like, "Hey, let's cook some some dinner together tonight," and so we're hanging out as a family in there, and it's like I can turn out a dinner real quick because now I don't need an hour to cook; I need 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense.
Alan, can I ask real quick, what is your number one meal prep meals sound like? I heard you just give the example of like a flap steak and rice and like asparagus. Would you say that that's a good example for someone who's like trying to literally copy and paste what you're talking about?
Yeah, specifically, and I like to marinate that flap steak or that flank steak with like a Korean beef barbecue type of marinade. And it's this really nice sort of teriyaki bowl type of flavor where you get that nice juicy steak, but with the lightness of rice and the freshness of asparagus, right? And so that is a really good, quick and easy type of
I'm
bowl.
hungry.
Yeah, meal prep. I have another segue to this, not to cut you off, but that's what I needed to hear. The next thing I needed to hear is, for protein, what would you say that your like top 3 or 2 this protein meal prep sort of bases? So I heard you say chicken thighs, chicken breasts, flap steak. Like, can I write those down for top 3, or would you like to make amendments?
Oh
Yeah, my top 3 for me ingredients for high protein.
Or just your
you
meal,
can get
your meal prep.
Yeah.
If I'm going high protein,
Yeah.
Okay.
and the meal prep I want it to taste good, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to find a grass-fed, grass-finished stew meat. So stew meat is usually like a bunch of little cuts of all the different cuts on a cow that you're supposed to use in like stews and everything else. But what most people don't know is if you slow cook stew meat, it's still tender. Versus if you cook it really fast, it can be tough. And so my favorite thing to do is to get all that stew meat, and it's in all these random shaped like little cubes and whatever else.
Because then you also have a higher collagen.
Yeah, collagen.
Yeah,
Right.
That really allows it to really break down the intermuscular parts.
I mean, I
stew.
I don't know the science behind it, but I do know it tastes good when I do it like this. I put it in a bag and I marinate it. Now,
Because doesn't it like turn like a gelatin S? All right, anyway, continue on.
no, stew meat does not.
No, the intermuscular fat. My bad. But anyway, continue on.
So the when I get the stew meat in the bag, I'm gonna murder the name, Worcestershire sauce.
Worcestershire
sauce.
Yeah.
When you see it in the grocery store,
don't enunciate, and you'll say it right.
Yeah, Worcestershire.
Yeah, there it is. It's in there. So he gets that in a bag.
And that is a very nice marinade. You could take literally just that, put it in a bag, some salt and pepper, a little bit of olive oil, let that thing marinate in there for a day or 2.
This is grass-fed, grass-finished stew meats.
And then slow cook it in a skillet, right? And then when you slow cook it in a skillet, if you're doing it for meal prep or you're doing it for bulk, undercook it. And then that way, when you go to reheat it, right, it's not going to be overcooked because you're not going to cook it to completion. And then you're going to recook it. You're going to cool it down in the fridge, and then you're going to recook it when you go to reheat it. I will slow cook it and then undercook it, right? And if you're working with a quality meat, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and beef doesn't have the issues of undercooking like poultry does, then you can put those into containers.
Yeah, that's how the airlines do it. They have a pretty. It's very well known how they package up and cook their foods to a specific temperature and doneness for that last mile.
And I don't think anybody's bragging about eating airline food unless you're flying like Qatar or something.
No, but
there's a science to it.
Yeah, there's a science to it.
100%.
That's what I was trying to say.
And
the
so,
most optimal bite. Going through this process, by doing that, that's a critical step.
Undercooking it, Alan. You're right. Because if it's overcooked, then you just bought stew meat that's all tough, and you're just going to waste. It literally ruins everything.
So that is my favorite, and so that with like a little bit of rice and some veggies, or just veggies, like that is a really good all around meal that I would say is like my number one favorite. And because when you eat it at work, it's going to have plenty of flavor. It's going to be enough protein, and it's also going to have, some carbohydrates and everything else. So if you're going to go work out, or you're going to go to a kid's sports game, or you're going to go out and expend some energy, it's just very well rounded.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that's one of my favorite. The other bowl is one of my favorite. Now, I will also do this on days when I'm really busy, like mentally. Chicken thighs. Although chicken thighs aren't the best in terms of like protein density and micronutrients, chicken thighs have fat in them, and so it usually gives them a really good flavor. And they're usually easier to cook because they're thinner than chicken breasts, and most people know you have to cook your chicken to 165 degrees to an internal temp to get rid of salmonella and other items like that. By the way, when I did all this culinary, I was ServSafe certified and all that other stuff. So I actually, I ran a student kitchen. I had to know about foodborne illnesses. I had to know about cooking and prep work and all this other stuff. And so for me, the chicken thighs, when I have a high work day or like a lot of meetings, the chicken thighs are just a good protein. It's got some fat in there. You can get a nice sauce on it. Like there's barbecue sauces out there that, have 2 or 3, maybe 4 ingredients. They're not loaded with high fructose corn syrup or seed oils. It's usually like molasses, some mustard, brown sugar, a sauce I can't enunciate, right? and anyway,
brown sugar, and
that's totally fine to have on there, right?
No,
it's totally fine to have on there, because remember, it's about high protein meals. It's about minimizing the disruptors to your endocrine system, which are going to be the seed oils, which are going to be the the microplastics or the pesticide contaminants that are found in processed foods. And, so that's a really good snack that I like. I'm also going to be...
Hold on, that's not a snack. That's a meal. Right?
Yeah, it's a meal. Yeah, I'll eat 3 or 4.
I'm just talking about meal prep and how to save money and what to buy. And so if your number one thing was grass-fed, grass-finished, stew meat, and then I, under prepare it to a certain degree just because there's other phases in the meal prep. Then you also talked about a flap steak with a little bit of a teriyaki flavor for the rice bowl. Yep. So I was just looking for like a third meal prep because I let's say I'm new with it and I don't want to get food burnout because I am at times impulsive like Wally where it's like, hey, I've had this for 3 days. I need something different. You know what I mean? So if I don't do what you're going to say now, I might just end up making sort of like half-assed meals.
So my next favorite one are tacos.
Okay.
So most people might not know this, but ground beef is actually one of the most nutrient-dense meats that you can get because ground beef encapsulates many of the muscle groups on the cow plus ligaments and some other items. And so they have, through the ligaments and everything else, they have a lot of bioavailability of the nutrients that are in there, and they're very nutrient dense. And so, as you know, tacos can be made with any type of meat. And so my favorite, or I shouldn't say my favorite, but one of my favorite meals that's quick and easy, you can get ground beef. And I will usually try to mix in, if you like black beans, or you like some cheese or anything else, you can cook the ground beef, drain the fat out, and then you can incorporate either some tomatoes or some beans or anything that you like in your tacos, right? Some cheese. Mix it all in there. Put it in containers. I use glass Tupperware containers. And so you can put it in a nice container, right? And now you've done all the heavy lifting. And so like if I'm at home, now guess what all you need? If you're at home, you just put a little bit of butter in that. Remember my cast iron skillet pan, right? Because it's easy to clean and you constantly season. It's got good flavor. Now just put a little bit of butter in that. Boom, 3 or 4 street taco tortillas in there, right? Once they're kind of fried up, sprinkle some Parmesan on top. Hey, right? Flip them, sprinkle some more Parmesan on top. Boom, pull them off. You heat up your meat, whether it's in the microwave or whatever, depending on how much cleanup or time you have. Put some meat on top, maybe a little bit of cilantro or green onions or some pulled spinach, right? A little lime, boom, tacos. And now you have literally saved yourself all that time. Now let's go back to, okay, well, I eat a mostly animal-based diet, a lot of fruit, and I'll factor in some vegetables here and there. But, I have found that a very high-protein diet is what works very well for me. And so when I go to the skillet, I don't just cook a pound of ground beef. I cook 4 or 5, maybe even 6. And so that's when we talked about it earlier. The size really does matter. Hello. Yeah. And you can season the beef in different ways. And so like I might do a carne asada one, right? I might do a like traditional steak type of flavor, like a Montreal steak or, something that's kind of like a salt heavy type of seasoning. Or I can go the other route, which is like, fairly spicy. Right. And it just depends on what you're going to put it on, et cetera. And so for me, that's what I look for. Ground bison's also just as good. Don't discount the lamb. Lamb is really good, but lamb's tough to cook because it's usually a little bit more fatty.
Okay.
Same thing with duck. But yeah, those are like some of my really quick strategies, but I can say this about recipes. I love to cook, and so when I have that time, I want to go and I want to explore something that I think I could put my twist on and I